I'm Elbe from Elbe's Edibles. We do handcrafted edibles in Portland, Oregon since 2010. Mothers and cooks have always been taking care of families medicinally through food. My best friend's mom got breast cancer and lung cancer, and we knew that cannabis would help her, but we knew for sure that she wouldn't be able to inhale with the breast cancer and the lung cancer. Also, her husband was a sergeant with Multnomah County Sheriff's Department, so we were pretty sure he didn't want to have smoke in his house either. So we just started making cookies for her. By putting cannabis in food, it was a way to deliver the medicine without having to smoke, and that was the first part that was important. I went and looked at some old recipe books that mothers had to use when there was no doctors around. When you're sick with cancer, you're going through a million things, and one of the things you go through is side effects from the medication. I'm not a fan of the cannabis flavor. I hide it in my food as much as I can. I try to make it really so you don't taste it at all. And the reason I do that is because when you're sick and when you're on medicine, your taste buds get affected. Everything is affected. And so if your life is pretty hard and you're going through a lot of illness and a lot of doctor's appointments and filling out paperwork and all of the stresses that come along with being sick, if you can have a nice pastry that looks good and tastes good, it's like a little treat too. I'm a baker, and so I like using butter to bake. We do make our own butter. We grow part of our medicine. We grow for the butter. We also have to outsource it. We source it from several big farms that we've had great working relationships with. We have a scientific formula, so it's consistent every time. We're canna butter based. I believe that canna butter is evenly distributed throughout my pastries. When you cook, there's a scientific formula to how butter works with gluten, and so all of those things are taken into consideration. It's not easy to do edibles. It's not easy to make cannabis into medicine. It's a process. And edibles react differently to every single body. It doesn't matter how tall you are, how short you are. None of those things matter. Every body reacts differently to edibles. When we started this 5 years ago, there was a very real chance that at any time the feds could knock on the door and we would go to prison. We were doing something expressly against their will. We were giving cannabis to patients. And the feds said, we don't want you to do that. It doesn't matter what your state said. All of the things that you see now in dispensaries are there because of the clubs. People didn't have labels on their food. People didn't have proper packaging. We would see things in like sandwich bags. There would be, couches, and you could smoke in some of the facilities. It did have a clubhouse feeling in a lot of places, but we were just in private clubs. We were delivering to patients' homes. We were meeting people in parking lots. If you were a patient and you had a need, we would meet you. There was a whole learning curve to edibles too. A lot of people had tried brownies in the 70s or the 80s, and they ate it and it tasted awful, or they got too high and they got sick. So there was a whole segment of people who didn't even want to mess with edibles. So we spent a lot of those first 2 years educating our patients, giving out free samples in the clubs, doing meets and greets, just doing anything we could to do outreach. But a lot of it was in people's living rooms, and a lot of it was in parking lots. A lot of Safeway parking lots, a lot of Fred Meyer parking lots all over the city. The patients are still our driving force. The patients are the reason I get up every morning. Cannabis is not just about a business. It's about patients. It's about being there. It's about having a consistent product. If somebody's relying on you for their medicine every week, you need to have that medicine available to them every week. And if you can't, you have to figure out a way to do it. And so you just do it. This industry started on people's couches. They started in people's basements. So there wasn't a lot of support or love for people who used to deal marijuana. That's how people got their medicine. 20 years ago, you didn't speak about what you did. And now we spend all of our time speaking about it. It takes a minute. It takes a minute to be okay with talking publicly and to your peers about how you do what you do. And so we're learning. We're going to learn faster, though. I was a sheriff's deputy for Multnomah County for 15 years. I worked in the corrections branch. I saw really, truly up close that the war on drugs was a complete and utter failure. The entire time I worked for the sheriff's department, it was one of the things that was really heartbreaking, was watching people get brought in on drug charges over and over and over again. I knew personally of more than 5 inmates who came into Multnomah County on the regular. I worked at the same jail for 15 years. I talked to them all the time. And it was from a charge from 15 years ago, 17 years ago, 20 years ago. And it's the same man coming in every month over and over again because he can't pass a P test, or because he doesn't show up to take the P test because he knows he's been smoking pot, so he just doesn't show up. I mean, it's a system set up to fail. And so then that person has a warrant, and then there's a new charge, and then there's and the money just grows and grows and grows. How much that costs society, how much that costs his family. The kids now have to visit him at jail, or they don't visit him, and then it ruins that family dynamic. And it's all because somebody said there was reefer madness, that we're all going to lose our minds if we smoke pot. I've always smoked pot throughout my life. I've never seen it be a deterrent for employment or social issues with my family. It's just always been somewhat part of my life. And then when I worked at the sheriff's office, I saw the changeover with the Oregon medical marijuana program. I started seeing people coming into the jail and they had their medical cards. And at first, I was seeing officers throw those cards away, confiscate their medicine, because we didn't really have guidelines back then. We didn't know what we were supposed to do. So I kind of saw that stuff go on and on. But something happened about 6 or 7 years ago, and the social shift, maybe the conversations were out more, but law enforcement started backing it up. And I do know that Multnomah County is actually really, really great about it now. I think Portland is one of the safest places to be a patient under the medical marijuana program. They've been very supportive from the very beginning. How everybody's changed their mind in the last couple of years has been really nice, but the years leading up to it, the fear factor, the throwing people into jail for it. We have people in prison doing life sentences for marijuana. That makes no sense to me, and it makes no sense to most of law enforcement. The people who are in jail were not a division of who lives in society. It was poor people, it was people of color that were always getting popped for drugs. Yes, some white people too, but in general, there is a reason that the stereotype is that the people are in jail. I mean, it's just not great. And if you're only putting poor people into jail, and if you're only targeting poor people for drug crimes, I mean, that's who you're going to find it, because it's in every part of the society. And so those are the people who end up in jail, the people who are targets. And once marijuana is not illegal, those targets go off their backs for those crimes. Suddenly the people, if you see somebody walking down the street with a joint, or if you smell marijuana in a car, it's not a big deal. It's not the big deal anymore. And so we don't have to target people all the time. We can worry about other crimes. I know judges who've smoked pot. I've known doctors who've smoked pot. I know people who've smoked pot my whole life. It's just that the politicians hadn't quite caught up with it yet. They didn't realize that all those people who weren't part of the patient programs were already self-medicating in some way, or they were looking for it to be legal so they wouldn't have to go to jail for the mere reason of smoking a joint at the end of the day. I've been smoking pot my whole life. I'm a business owner. I keep it together. I'm a responsible person. The people I know that smoke pot, they're responsible people. It's the laws that make it really hard for people to live their lives properly. Oregon is full of people who do what they want to do when they want to do it. And there's a lot of dream chasers here. And so for me, I found a passion, and I decided as an Oregonian that there was going to be nothing between me and my passion.